Hello and welcome back. Today's guest is Deborah Henry, someone who I've been trying to get onto the show for months, and it is sod's law that when I eventually managed to make it happen and fly all my podcast stuff back to KL to do the interview, I managed to screw up the audio recording. So if you're wondering why I sound like I'm at the bottom of a swimming pool and speaking through a Kermit the Frog voice emulator, then that is the reason why. We've had to scrape my audio from Deborah's microphone, so I do apologize that I don't sound the clearest on this one. The good news is Deborah was the star of the show and her microphone was working, and I think she has some incredible messages to share in here. She's someone who was former Miss Malaysia. She was a competitor at Miss Universe Worlds, and she has gone on to be a successful entrepreneur and a head of a social organization which is raising awareness, money, and giving refugees a chance at life in Malaysia. So she is a truly inspirational woman and someone that I think that we could all learn a lot from. So I really hope you enjoy the episode, and thanks for bearing with me whilst I am still struggling through trying to run a podcast as a one-man band and dealing with all the technical nightmares that come with it. But yeah, I really appreciate your support, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Deborah, thank you so much for coming on. You were extremely highly recommended by one of my previous guests, who was one of my favorite guests, which is Frankie Turner. So I'm really looking forward to having this episode with you. Would you mind by just starting with a bit of your history and the many hats you've worn over the past couple of decades and what it's led you to now?
Yeah, so I often feel like when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, which hat am I wearing today? And it can get a little bit confusing. But I guess my career started when I was still a teenager, still in school. I was 15 years old, got scouted to be a model, and kind of reluctant model. I didn't really it wasn't something I wanted to do, but I started doing it and then earned a little bit of pocket money. And I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. So I think that was the beginning of my career in the fashion and entertainment industry. And promised my parents and myself that I'd go to university. So then took 3 years off, went to Australia for university, came back to Malaysia, got back into the scene. I never really left the scene. And it's kind of been, I think my life in the entertainment industry since then has always been, it's just kind of ebbs and flows. And I think in Malaysia, the industry is rather small. So how you navigate it, I don't think you can just do one thing, maybe unless you're like Siti Nurhaliza, like top big singer, but you tend to do a few different things. So it's been modeling, it's been hosting, television, moderating, kind of sucked as an actress, so never ended up down that path. But also coming out of university, I was super convicted. I studied political science, economics. So coming out of uni, I was very convinced that I wanted humanitarian work or development work to be a sort of a central part of what I do. And and I kind of managed, when I came back to Malaysia, few things came together and I sort of ended up setting up my own nonprofit. And that's been something that I've been very committed to until today.
Is that your primary focus at the moment?
I think coming out of, before COVID and then coming out of COVID, yes, it takes up probably like 50% of my time. And it's been, I think, a couple of things: building a team, challenging, I guess, the definition of what a nonprofit is, and especially in Malaysia, it's constantly begging for money, and I'm really trying to move away from that. So building a really strong team that has a vision and can actually move closer to where we want to go with our impact. Establish really good funders, funding, so that we're not desperate for money and we can actually plan forward. So I think the past 3 years that's kind of been my focus. And so I can build a nonprofit, eventually hire a CEO to run it, so I can and perhaps do other things.
Awesome. And the thing you're running at the moment is called Fugee.
Yes.
And it is dedicated to helping refugees, specifically in education, right?
Yeah.
That's my high-level synopsis. And go into a bit more.
No, it's not about, essentially, yes. So refugees in Malaysia, like a couple of other vulnerable communities, don't have legal access to education. So they are essentially considered to be undocumented, hence illegal in this country. Although UNHCR, which is the UN refugee agency that looks after them, is here, and They carry blue cards, which is a form of protection, identification and protection. They are denied the right to school. They can't work legally, and healthcare is very, very limited. So we have a whole bunch of people here, 180,000 children, I think about 50,000. And you're here, you're pretty much safe, but you're not allowed to work. You're not allowed to kind of do anything. So if you imagine that situation, what that would feel like for a child, for a young person, and even for a parent not being able to provide for your family. So the situation gets really, it's very, I guess, self-destructive. Sort of Fugee, what we do is, although we're a nonprofit that's focused purely on education, we have to look after, you're kind of like a mini government. You're looking after all the different aspects of a person, or what someone needs to be able to live a happy life, right? So yeah, so we pretty much run a school, kindergarten all the way up to high school. We run youth programs to encourage youth to pursue tertiary education, scholarships, and I guess we look at things a little bit more long term. When you talk about education, you talk about investing in an education. The results aren't today. The results are like, you went to high school, you got a job, and look at where you are today and what you're doing. Often it's a result of things that were done in your past, right? So it's, how do we invest and champion that child's success today at the age of 5 or at the age of 10 while they are in Malaysia, so that when they move on to that next phase of their life, which in many cases is Malaysia, but in many cases isn't, how do we know that they have the skills and the right tools to be able to go on and be successful? So that's kind of the vision.
The thing that stuck out to me about the blue card, which is, this is the first time I'm hearing about it, but if you're a refugee here and you don't have the right to work, is there any financial support, or where is the plan for these people to be self-sufficient?
So there isn't any, not official support, financial support. I think it comes from the nonprofit sector. So it is organizations like Fugee that will support families in one way or the other. The reality is that we know, I think one of the common traits, human nature, no matter who you are, where you come from, is we're hardwired to survive from our like hunter-gatherer days. So put anyone in a tough situation and they're going to try to survive, whatever it takes. And so you see that in Malaysia. People they'll work illegally, they will get exploited, they will start a business from their homes, they will clean other people's houses. Whatever you can do that suits your skill set, or even if it's something that's, you feel, even if you do something that you feel is kind of like derogatory, you do what you have to do to take care of your families. And so it creates quite an interesting mindset in people. It's, I think on one hand, it's a victim mindset. So you're constantly also looking for people to help you, looking for handouts, which isn't good for anyone. But then you're also living month to month and very desperate. So you have no extra dollar to be able to save for some health concern with your child. So we see it all. A kid needs to go in for an operation. We're fundraising 30,000 ringgit. A parent falls and breaks their leg on the job. You're paying for the family's rent. Sometimes families can't afford to pay their school fees, things like that.
It just feels like they're systematically being set up to fail, right?
Yeah.
If you're put into a situation, I don't care how good your moral standing is, where your choice is let your family starve or break the law.
If you break the law.
You break the law, right? And maybe in some cases that is working without a right to work there. But justifiably and understandably, like, some going to have to turn to crime. Like, there are going to be no other options.
Yeah, and I would say this, I don't have the data on this, but with 16 years experience working with refugees in Malaysia and the wider community, I don't see a huge amount of data of people turning to crime. Of course, in any community there will be bad apples for whatever reason, but I don't see that as being like, everyone's going to go do, really bad criminal activities in order to take care of themselves. So I think we're actually quite lucky, considering refugees do live amongst society. So there is some degree of integration, but not enough. But it also offers the opportunity for people to learn about somebody else's life, right? I think there is a very anti-narrative, not just in Malaysia, but around the world. But when someone gets when I sit here across from you and you're a refugee, and I'm like, okay, you're kind of the same. You have the same goals, dreams. You made a joke and I laughed, and you build connection and commonalities. And suddenly you're less scary. Suddenly I'm less afraid, right? And suddenly you're human to me. So I think these kind of conversations are super important to have.
100%. And something my parents taught me was that exposure and travel was the cure to racism. It's to go and meet people and realize that, there isn't just one group of villains in the world. Yeah. And especially when you're labeling people that have had nowhere else to turn and were so desperate with that brush.
Yeah.
It's terrible. And if that's what they're coming to, where they're in a community that, perhaps has a predisposition to look down on them or be suspicious of them, they don't have the right to work, they don't have the right to healthcare or anything else that would be provided to a regular citizen.
Yeah.
What are they running from that would make that a better option?
Exactly. So I think there's a huge amount of empathy that we need. And Malaysians are a generous people. We are charitable, but the empathy to that other life, where they've really come from. And I think with that empathy comes, this person may not think like us, act like us, behave like us, but we may not agree with everything they're doing, but that empathy allows you to build that bridge, to try to understand, to also try to educate, and also to listen, right? So, but that all comes with, you don't even have this, then it's very easy for me to just hate on you, right? I mean, we see this always on social media. It's so easy to vilify someone when you know 5% of the story. But yeah, I agree with you. I say traveling is, what I say with traveling is get out of your comfort zone. And I think I echo a lot of Anthony Bourdain's quotes. He has some amazing quotes on travel, but it's experience what it feels to be a minority in another country when you are so insignificant and no one cares about you and your needs and your likes and your desires. But that feeling, what that feels like, that's such an important experience for anybody to have, because we get so comfortable with, this is my life and everything works the way I like it and works for me. So that's, I think Malaysians need a little bit more of that.
I don't think it's just Malaysian.
Everyone.
Yeah, 100%. I think, and I haven't been as exposed to it in Malaysia as you obviously have, but coming from the UK, we have a sort of national sense of arrogance that we're still a great country and a world power.
The empire.
Literally. And when people are coming here as a refugee, it's not because of what they're running from, it's because Britain's so great that they want to be a part of it, they want to come and take the jobs and everything else. And people are frequently crossing the channel in boats that are capsizing and dying on the journey over there.
Yeah.
And you don't think it's actually the cat that's chasing them rather than the smell of the cheese that they're running to, right? Because when they get to the UK, they're still not going to have...
Life's not necessarily great.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's still very hard. But I think that's it, right? I mean, I'm not saying, just let anyone come into your country and who cares about immigration? Of course, we have borders. That's the reality of our world. We have borders. We need to protect them. We have national security interests. That's the realistic part, right, of governments and politics. But at the same time, it's you have to solve the core issues, right? If wars are breaking out all over the Middle East and all these countries and all of the big superpowers are, sticking their fingers into this mess, refugees are a symptom. They're a consequence of that. So you want to solve the refugee problem, you've got to look at the politics behind it. But anyway, that's another a very big conversation.
100%.
And so, coming back to Malaysia, for me, it's not that I'm utopian and I'm like, we should just let everyone. I'm not. I'm just like, look, they're here. In the 16 years I've been working with the refugee community, this has been a reality. Are we going to just sweep this under the rug, or are we going to try to solve this? And with that, you need to be able to accept it for what it is. You've got to look at the pros and cons. You've got to create framework. If we bring in millions of migrant workers, let refugees work. You can manage it. You can allow, you can tax them. You can target it at specific industries where you need the labor. We have the intelligence. None of this is rocket science. You need a bunch of people to sit together and map it out. So hopefully we're on that journey as a country now to I guess if our government wants to provide a little bit more documentation, a bit more security on government side to say, okay, we know these people are here, and maybe once that happens, then being able to work and access all these basic rights will be a little bit more available. So time will tell.
I fully agree about the workforce thing, because I guarantee if you give someone like that an opportunity who's coming from that, trying to build a life and save their family,
They work very hard.
They work very hard. And there was this narrative in the UK that refugees were coming over and taking our jobs. And if a refugee that's coming from a non-English speaking country who probably never even learned English at all can come over here and take your job,
what does that say about it?
exactly, like, yeah, they're not coming over and taking your job. They're taking the jobs that no one else wants to do out of desperation. And what's the alternative? Because you can't just turn your back on them. And granted, most people these days weren't alive during during the Great World Wars, but Britain, we were sending our kids away as refugees at that point as well. But now it's so nice to sit on the peaceful island and just close your eyes to what's going on in the rest of the world, right?
Yeah, I think it's a balance of security. It's a balance of, economic interest, right? Humanitarian interest. Like, I don't know. I even if you make that argument, I'm not sure anyone really cares for it at this point. People are so desensitized, dehumanized with what's going on in the world. So even from an economic argument, there is value to be had, right? It's just a matter of how you manage it. And like I said, for Malaysia, at least, we bring in millions of migrant workers. We pay shit ton of money for it. So you have labor here. Why not use them? And then you reduce exploitation, you reduce human rights abuses, you look good on the international stage. You have an innovative, forward-thinking mindset.
And a larger law-abiding workforce.
And exactly. So it's better for all, but you need to want to do it. You need the will. I think at the end of the day, that it comes down to that. If someone with some influence and power is really pushing this forward, and I guess making it some form of priority, then eventually, it should happen sooner rather than later. But it's been many years and we're still waiting. So
you're doing a good job at leading the way so far.
And that's it, right? That's the role of Fugee. We're like, we want to work within framework. Most law-abiding citizens, anyone who runs a company would. But in the meantime, we need to also, I want to make sure people can survive, and I want to set people up for success. So what do I do as a nonprofit to support that, right? And for us, education has been the... What is going on?
I have no idea.
Anyway, education has been that tool that we use to be able to do that. And I feel like it's rewarding for us. We see results with the community. And so far we've been able to create pathways where, like from school to, I guess from primary school to high school to college, university, to potentially internships, to job, we're sort of finding ways to make that happen.
What was the main thing that you've seen that has been the cause for people wanting to not just become a refugee here, but it's causing people to leave their home countries?
Pure and simple, it's just conflict, violence. It's, you look at countries like Afghanistan, look at the rights of women there, Yemen, Somalia's had like a protracted war for decades at this point. Sometimes even Pakistan, which by right shouldn't be exporting refugees, they actually have quite a few here. A few other African countries as well, Syria, up to recently, Iraq. So all the typical hotspots.
And is there a particular demographic that you're seeing more of that can come here, or is it the European coast as well?
Also Malaysia, because we're geographically closer to Myanmar, so the largest population in Malaysia is the Rohingya population. Of course, the total Myanmar population, I think makes up over 80%. And the Rohingya is the bulk of that. So they're in an even more precarious situation because not only are they, I guess, refugees, they are essentially defined as stateless, which means that they're actually back home. They're denied access. They're denied rights like citizenship rights. Mm. So they're seen as they have nowhere to go back to. So even if we said go back to your country, they actually by right have nowhere because Myanmar doesn't kind of denies that, right? So So that's actually very problematic because then they're here, but nowhere else to go. So
yeah, we definitely have a bit of pop culture in the West, and when it comes to broadcasting the news of wars that are going on, and Myanmar has been going on for so long, but I guarantee half of my friends that I went to school with wouldn't even heard of it and wouldn't even know it's a country, right? And there are tens of hundreds of thousands of people that are being displaced.
Yeah.
And war is the leading cause, right? Is there, if there was a close second, what would there be?
I think climate change is an increasing one. So in a lot of, I mean, you maybe not so much refugees, but we use the term internally displaced people. So there's floods. If your lands that you live on, people live in more rural areas, deforestation, floods, evictions, fires, things like that, you end up getting displaced within your own country. And I think and if you look at a lot of the data on that, it seems to be a growing trend where you're going to have more and more displaced people due to environmental changes.
And you do a lot of work with the kids of refugees as well, right? And what are they like in terms of receiving education? As a kid, a very spoiled kid, going to school as a child.
Do I have
exactly, yeah. Is it a similar mindset? Is it kids need kids, or is it different?
I mean, so a lot of the people that come to Fugee school will say how your kids are like so excited to learn. They have such a thirst for knowledge, which, yeah, if you talk about last growing up, you're like, God, do I have to go to school? So, I think that seems to be the general position that children have. They really want to be there. And I think schools are important. And I saw this when I went on a mission, you call it mission trips with World Vision to Lebanon. And I went out into the Bekaa Valley, which is near the border with Israel. And we visited a lot of populations that live there. Some were refugees from Syria that had come over. This was in the early days of the Syrian war. So like back in 2013, 14, around there. And it's what you see with school is it gives children, it's so important. And that's why when you see any massive conflict situation, even what you see happening in Gaza now, amidst all the destruction, you'll see non-profits and organizations like, we need to set up a school, we need something, like even if it's in a tent, have the kids come, have a clown, have something going on, because that it's so important because it gives them a routine. It's something they can wake up to in the morning, go to, and have focus on that. So that routine that they have every day as children. And also, I guess, in a way, that distraction, right? That there's something there that's making them laugh or making them feel different things. Otherwise, children just retreat and they suffer in silence. You only see those effects. Some kids stop talking when they hear the bombs and things like that. So I saw a lot of this in Lebanon. And so, yeah, so even in Malaysia, right? Obviously, it's not a war zone here, but that I can go to school in the morning. I have something to look forward to. I'm focused. I'm having fun. I feel loved. I feel valued, supported. People care about me. I'm going to go on a school trip. I'm learning something. I have something to look forward to. So you're not just waking up and living for today, but in 6 months' time, I have an exam. I've got to move on to grade 2. So there's a lot of this that happens. And so it wires them to actually think about a future. And you see this as kids get older. The younger ones obviously like, I'm having fun, less aware. But as you get older, you're more aware of the family problems. You're more aware of your reality, the harsh realities. You witness the trauma. You witness the sort of the desperation and the difficulties that your parents are going through. And often you get dragged into it. So then you become the breadwinner. You've got to earn money for the family. You can't sleep at night because you're stressed. And then for families here, they're like, oh, we're waiting for resettlement. When can we leave Malaysia? Everyone wants to go to America and Canada. Like, my life will be better there, right? So then that hope, like, is it going to be today? Is it going to be today? And they never know when they're getting resettled, because Malaysia's a temporary, like a transit point, right? So you'll get a call from UN and say, okay, come in for your final medical examinations. And then 3 months later, you're resettled, just like that. And you've been in Malaysia for 7 years. So it's a very weird experience. I can compare it to COVID, when we couldn't move anywhere. We were stuck here, and I couldn't see my family in Australia, and I couldn't see my family in the UK. And I was like, oh, we miss everyone. It's been 2 years. Or someone's stuck somewhere. And this is what these families go through for decades.
It's like COVID, but you're the only ones in quarantine.
and you can't get on a plane ever. They can't get on a plane. You don't have any means to do that. And you sometimes don't even know if you ever see each other again, and nothing is in your control. So it is a very debilitating situation to be in. What we see is like what we see is the visual stuff. I don't have enough money to put food on the table or to whatever, pay for things. But you don't see the emotional turmoil that a lot of them experience. But still, we're like, be motivated, pass your exams, study hard. You're going to have dreams about being, what's your ambition? So we're there kind of like, like egging them on and trying to encourage them to like be more, do more. This is your chance. Education is going to help you break out of these shackles. But there's a huge reality that's sitting at home for them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
They need that distraction. They need that hope for the future.
Yeah. And as hard as it is, yeah, it's sort of doing the hard work now. And eventually I finished school. I got decent grades. I got into university. I managed to get a degree. And eventually, hopefully if resettlement comes, or even doesn't here, you can somehow find a job that pays you a little bit better, whether it's online or something, or you can be a little bit more entrepreneurial and try and start your own thing. But yes. And we always use this tagline of Fugee: educated child, impact generations. So the idea that we pay to educate one kid, it never stops with them, right? It's their families, it's their kids, and it's a generational stuff.
Yeah. And one of the things to make that Fugee reference, I was thinking about how, I felt and how everyone else felt when you couldn't go and see friends and family for a few months at a time. And for these people, they've left all of those friends and family behind and have no idea if they'll ever see them again.
Yeah.
Crazy position.
Yeah.
If you could change one thing about the general public's mindset when it comes towards refugees, what would you aim to do and what do you think would be most impactful?
Well, I like you said earlier, no one chooses to be a refugee. And I think that's the most obvious thing was recently with Syria. You saw with Assad kind of disappearing, the country being somewhat liberated, people want to return. So people actually want to go home. They want to rebuild their lives. They want to be connected to their family. So I think that's one key thing that we need to remember. I always say, put yourself in someone else's shoes. Imagine if bombs dropped on you, on your house today. What would you do? Are you going to sit around and wait? Are you going to run away with your kids to protect them? So I think that initial understanding of what does it mean to be a refugee? And it can happen to anyone, no matter how privileged you are. It can happen to all of us. And then I think in saying that, recognizing the value that refugees have, the values that they can bring to your society. And then it's a win-win situation. It can actually be a win-win situation from economics, business creation, shared learnings, a more diverse population. It's not I think this mindset of they're going to come and take and, like eat us up and there's nothing left. Yeah, moving away from that. And I think examples of that have been in Turkey and Germany. There are many examples of how that actually can work pretty well. And I think in the case of Malaysia, where we don't have such a huge number of refugees, where we actually can make it work. So yeah, I would say get to know somebody who's a refugee, meet someone who's actually lived that experience. And I think that would change how you think about the whole topic.
And could they do that through your company, Fugee? Yeah. They could come along and help out and expose themselves in that way.
Yeah. So what we did last year for World Refugee Day in June, we launched this campaign called Jom Borak, which is Malay for like colloquial Malay for like, hey, let's chat, right? And so that was exactly the intention. We can do these fancy campaigns and like preach at people and talk about humanitarianism and all that. Doesn't quite work. So Jom Borak is really literally a bunch of people sitting around the table, doing what we love Malaysians do best, which is eating, but with friends. So breaking bread essentially with friends and refugees, Malaysians, whoever, whatever, and actually just getting to know each other. And we launched a few series of those last years and they were really successful. And so many people came away going, I've never met a refugee. Like I've completely different perspective now. And that person, the value of that person, when they go home, they talk to their families, they talk to their friends. If it comes out casually, that mindset, we planted that seed, if you will. And that changes how they think and how their circle of influence, right? What that is. And these are the people that are ever in positions of power will perhaps be some of the change makers, right? And so I can't talk about the older generations, but at least we can talk about like the younger generations who are going to be moving into those positions of power, that they have that experience, that exposure to be able to make different decisions.
100%. I think it's awesome what you're doing. I can tell how passionate you are about it. And I think for a lot of people, especially in this day and age, a lot of people are very vocal about world events that are going on, and you're actually walking the walk and making a big difference in the community.
And I think it's a matter of principle, right? Because I've been thinking about this so much, because why do some people prioritize this but not this? What is this hypocrisy or hierarchy of which causes are more important than others? And without judging, what was that phrase on TikTok? We judge, we don't, we listen, we don't judge. I'm like, I judge in my mind. No, but it's how do you, what was my point? Oh, I lost it.
You were talking about one of the different ones there, I know, because I was feeling.
Oh yes, the hierarchy.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. It's relevance to you, right?
Yeah. So I for me, I've kind of like sort of filtered it down to principle, right? If it's a matter of principle, when you support something, or why do I say that what's happening in Gaza is a genocide, for example, or in the case of Malaysia, why is something considered unjust and unethical, right? It has to come down to a principle, not my personal belief or my religion says this, or it can, but then that principle that you believe needs to apply to everyone. So if I feel that, what is justice in a country, that everyone gets treated equally, then how do I apply that across the board in a fair and just way? And I think that's what I'm trying to hold on to when I look at different things. So at least, yeah. So, and that's what I encourage Malaysians to do, right? I mean, of course, we're all influenced by different things, but when you look at the global thing, look at it from a matter of what is the principle here? What's actually going on? Go down to the root of it and understand that. And I think that then, at least we're more consistent. It doesn't, because I can't stand hypocrisy where like people pick one thing and suddenly that's like, this, and it goes down to the same thing. This life matters more than that life. And so in a way, I'm like, then am I any better than the bad guy?
100%. I think you need to have consistency in your mindset across the board, but you also need to be aware of your own limitations and what you can change. And one of the things that I heard you say on a podcast that I listened to you on was you found this Fugee thing. You spent some time with refugees and you were like, okay, this is something that I can focus on. This is something that I feel passionate enough about to get involved in. And that doesn't mean you don't care about everything else that's going on in the world, but you've got to understand that you need to focus down on something in order to make a difference. And yeah, I think that you've done a great job of that, whilst also obviously maintaining interest and consistency across the board in your own beliefs.
Yeah. And yeah, I think for me with refugees is because they have no safety net. At least Malaysians, you have safety. You have a safety. You have our government. And you have resources that we can access. For refugees, they really don't. They're very much invisible. So, but yeah, I always encourage people. I'm like, don't be blind when you do social work or charity work or whatever. Don't be blind about it. Like, research. Like, know who you're giving to. Go visit them. Be smart about your donations. Like, don't be a ignorant donor either. That's not necessarily helpful. And everyone picks something, and we need that. It's we need to save the animals and the environment and live within them.
But if you try and do all of it on your own,
you can't do it all. So yeah, I try to. I mean, it's also moving away from my I feel like I'm like Miss Charity on my forehead, coming from the beauty queen thing where it's all about world peace, and then having this and I get so many phone calls from people and it's like, what am I, like a free charity, mascot, so even for me, I've had to pull back on that and say, sorry, these are my focuses. This is what I do. I do support everything, but I cannot realistically, I can't give myself to everything, for free. So yeah.
Yeah, 100%. The beauty thing, transitioning into this, was it hard, or did it just feel like it was natural and you being?
I think it was natural.
Yeah.
Because my core state was this. Yeah. And the beauty thing was like something I did, and then it was a vehicle.
So you always knew, you think, that this
was... I think I was just one of those 15-year-olds that was, talked about justice.
Yeah. Okay. And what else are you doing alongside this? Because this takes up half your time, and you're also an entrepreneur, right? You have other things going on.
Yeah. So what I've been focusing on now. So I guess transitioning still in the industry. I sort of decided for 2024 I was going to be hyper focused on a very few things, especially in this industry where you can be, jack of all trades. You have your finger in so many different things, and sometimes your weeks go by and you, what have I done? And a bit of this, a bit of that. So I really wanted to be very focused, which meant I stopped going to like a lot of events, like things that I just, to like turn up and kind of wave at the camera, like, I just kind of reduced a lot of that. So it was very much, I MC a lot of events, so MCing events, moderating. I moderate a lot of conferences and panel discussions and things like that. So a lot of that work, and then my podcast, which we launched last year. So kind of that was the work stuff, and then the dominant work stuff, for last year. And I had a jewelry business called Fugee, which was a social enterprise connected to the nonprofit, and we make jewelry, but we decided to sort of pivot away from jewelry. So in the process of rethinking what that would look like.
Amazing. Because you've been in the limelight for most of your adult life. And I had a question, which was...
all of my life, since I was a child. Yeah. Since I was 15. So, I don't know what it's like to... Yeah.
So this next question actually was given to me by one of your very close friends last year.
Yes.
Because your life has always been so in the public eye. What is one thing that the general public wouldn't know about you?
God, this is such a beautiful question. I hate these questions. I'm so bad at answering them. My answers are so boring. What is something the public doesn't know about me? I don't know. Danish was something the public doesn't know.
So this question...
I'm asking my producer. I have no idea. I mean, I feel... No, there's always something someone doesn't. I'm a bit of like I'm very much a homebody. I like being at home, family, close friends.
What you see is what you get, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
I'm also someone, I speak my mind. Is that what you mean?
When Frankie told me to ask that question,
she had an agenda.
She said that you are one of the best speakers and one of the most polished presenters that she's ever met, and it would be good to put you in a question that made you a little bit uncomfortable. I think
but everyone knows that.
Okay.
Well, she likes to hug me as well, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not like a physical touch person. Is that obvious? Even my grandpa's, I'm like, it's okay, you'll be all right. I'm like, it's a dog. Oh my God. So she every time I see her for like birthdays and stuff, she like hugs me for 10 seconds, and I'm like, okay, Frankie.
I love it. Okay, the last thing that I wanted to do is I've taken some quotes. One of them is something that I've heard you say, and the others are some that I've heard you share. And I love the quotes, and I've perhaps projected my own interpretation onto them.
Yeah.
But I'd like to hear you expand on them. The first one was, to help a child, you have to help the family. To help a family, you have to help the community.
Yes. So this, I've it's not mine, it's World Vision, this quote. And I visited Brazil with them. So World Vision is a global development organization. They do everything, and they go into communities. And so this, in essence, it's their plan. They go into communities for like 10 years, 5 to 10 years, to transform them, to help get communities on their feet, and then they pull out. That's their idea, right? And an example, like if I give you an example, the kids in school, families, a pretty poor family, not very educated, and you want the kid to stay in school and graduate and then go to university. But kid skips classes, mom keeps the kid home, needs to go help mom with this, that, and the other. So then you realize mom and dad don't have good jobs and don't have enough money, so they need the kid to work. So then you go, okay, if I want to keep the kid in school, I need to help the mom and dad. So then you help them set up a little, like, sundry shop selling whatever, and then so all of a sudden they're earning income, life's better, they have bigger dreams, aspirations for themselves and also for the children. Then you realize that, okay, mom and dad have a little shop now, but the community is pretty poor, not buying from them, and don't have good jobs, and their conditions are bad. So now you have to help the surrounding community and build hospitals and others sort of forms of employment and whatnot, right? So then you support the community. So that's the idea. You look at sustainable development, long run, where you don't want to keep giving people handouts and charity. I don't actually like the word charity because it's not sustainable and it's not a forever thing. It's a temporary thing. So if you're serious about that, it's to help a child, you got to look at the family. You got to expand the circle out, and then further out to see how do you support an ecosystem change. And I think that's a principle that you think even in the business world we apply this to all kinds of. It's like maybe what do you call it? Design thinking in a way.
It's quite a memeified old quote that if you give a man a fish, you can eat for a day. If you teach him how to fish, and that's been memeified to loads of different variations. But I think the important thing with that is the mindset. Is no one wants to feel like a charity victim, for life.
Yeah.
These people want to be in charge of their own lives and be able to provide for themselves. So I love that.
Yeah. And it's incredible, the human transformation when people feel dignity, to use that word. When someone can live with dignity, parent feels like they can provide for their families and they have a nice house to welcome, like little tiny things like that to us are not seeming, we don't think about these things. It's a game changer.
Okay. Next one. This is one that you shared. No one is born hating another person or their background or their religion. People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite.
Yeah. I feel like, should I just talk about bags and pants, shoes? And
Not on this podcast.
Should have just said the latest designer handbag was really cute. Yes. I mean, gosh, I think a lot of the work I do, I just confronted all the time with these different degrees of hypocrisy in the realities that it just hits me hard. And then, witnessing racism in all levels. And I think for me growing up, my mom's Irish, my dad's Malaysian. So it's the sense of always, I think for me personally, where do I belong? Where do I fit in? And the fact that I was a bit of a chameleon, anywhere I go to, I can kind of pretty much fit in, but also not feel fully at home in a way. So that sense of racism and picking a side and looking how myopic people can be just doesn't sit well with me. But yeah, I think a lot of the way kids are today it's their environments. It's how their parents behave in front of them, how the roles schools play in teaching racism. And I think this American author, he says it's not just saying I'm not racist, you have to be anti-racist. Everyone goes, I'm not racist, but, that's like the classic line. I'm not being racist, but did you see the He's like, it's not enough being that. You've got to be anti-racist. You've got to stand against what that is. And that comes with challenging a lot of our biases and the little things that we do and say. Of course, you can make jokes. That's fine. I mean, we don't want to kill comedy, but I think a lot of it starts from young. And so it's like, got to check yourself, because otherwise you're going to pass that onto the next generation.
100%. And I think there is a problem in today's society, and I understand why it's happened, where to combat racism, there is other forms of systematic racial prejudice being put into place, right? Like forcing companies to have a quota of how many people of a certain ethnicity they need to hire in order to be given a diversity value. So that is literally racism. You're literally then selecting people based on a certain race. So I should pause for a second. I think there must be some workmen upstairs or something.
Yeah, somebody's checking the walls.
Because I can work out, the noise is going all around.
It's like traveling, and then now it's like drilling sound.
Okay, right. I'll just jump back in from where I was there. So, I think the solution, I don't want to be all of these guys.
It's whatever the pendulum, right? It swings this way, and it swings back that way. And everyone's like, whoa, how do you...
Yeah, and I get why it's had to swing back the other way. The position that we're aiming for is in the middle, right? And you don't solve racism with racism. You solve it by just not seeing it anymore. And I don't want to be this privileged white man stood here being like, I've got the cure for racism. Everyone just stop talking about it. Like, that's not what I want to do.
Stopping racism.
Yeah. Tom's done it, everyone, world peace achieved.
Well, I think of that image where you have, what was that? It talks about equality, equity, and something else. I don't know if you've seen it. And it's like a little kid, and you're trying to look over the fence, right? And so, you know, the different boxes and the different size of the boxes. So fair is everyone gets the same size box. You know, equity is, okay, the kid who's differently able gets a different, like, you know, and so it's that, so that then comes down to justice and what's fair and just, right? So, yeah, how do you apply that? And that lens that you look at things from, right? Versus this blanket, like, okay, everyone who's this has this, everyone who's that has that. Because then you're perpetuating the, you know, like the Black Lives Matter, and then everyone White Lives Matter, and then White Lives Matter, and then you end up with another series of counts of like, and everyone is yet again defining themselves based on that, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, and they were all human. And how do you like see the other?
Last one. This was my favorite, by the way.
Give me a little bit more fun.
No. This one isn't. So rarely do we find men who willingly engage in hard, solid thinking. There is an almost universal quest for easy answers and half-baked solutions. Nothing pains some people more than having to think.
Woo, ouch. Well, I mean, I don't know, is the visual of like sheep is coming to my head, where I on one hand, I think everyone has so much going on in their lives that sometimes you just not even told what to think and what to do. You want someone to do the thinking for you, and you just gotta, you know, because you've got enough to deal with, finding the job, taking care of your family on one hand. But then I think it's that, I don't know, is it a laziness? Is it an unwillingness to, it takes effort, maybe. Especially like you look at the news today and like, what do I believe? What do I not believe? Or so much going on, so much information, social media. So, and it's easier, and it's easy when you're seeing someone who takes a position and like, yeah, because of this, and it's easy to just jump on that bandwagon.
100%.
So something I always do with myself now, I try to do is I really try to step back and like, hey, what's going on here? Like, can I listen to all sides? Can I, without like listen, without judging in a real sense, like listen to the sides. And no, I don't have to like jump on this bandwagon. I can process it, and you know, and I think that space that you can have to do that without,
it's an epidemic in this day and age, and I think it's been exacerbated by social media and just the fact that we are now so afraid to be bored and left alone with our own thoughts. And I thought this the other day, where I was sat down with no phones in my ears, no headphones on, no phone in my pocket, and I was just sat there and I was thinking, wow, this is actually a rare moment that I'm just sat with nothing at all. And how mad is that, to think that you're actually just left with your own thoughts for it? And then that's what you're thinking, well, how much time do I have to be a free thinker? If all I'm doing is consuming other people's opinions all the time, how much of this is actually my own thought, or is it just me regurgitating from the various thought leaders that I've got my information from? And I think that's a big problem, and why people are getting so sort of segmented in different schools of thought and so vigilant in their opinions, because they only get those opinions from those thought leaders. They're stuck in the echo chamber. So it seems like they believe this because they think about it all the time.
Yeah.
You think about it all the time because it's literally your social media feed that is constantly,
And then this, I need to defend it at all costs. And so this room to listen and to understand. And it was even on, like, to use this contentious abortion topic in the US, not to get into the details of it, but it seemed like it was either A or B. It was either you were pro or you were anti. And
it's either no or it's fun.
Yeah. And like, I'm not either, to be honest. Am I fully saying that no woman should be allowed to vote? But I'm saying, hey, get pregnant as you will, and we'll free abortions. Yeah, no, because that's also very unethical. But then the argument was like, actually, why is no one talking about, maybe there are, but in the mainstream, no one was talking about what are all the in-between options? What about A and Z? What about B, C, D, E, F, G that you can look at to actually get to a solution? So then you almost feel like, well, then it's like, what are we fighting for? The politics of it all just drags everybody there.
Yeah. And the reason for this is because humans naturally are more captivated towards black and white, a statement that is definitive and this is that. And if you're going to add in all of the nuance in that situation, it's not going to fit into a Twitter post.
Yeah.
So it's not going to go.
It's got to say it in your how many words.
Exactly. So if you've got 140 letters to summarize it, then of course it's going to seem a little bit extreme. Or if it is nuanced and balanced in both sides, it's just not interesting. And, it doesn't get the same traction.
Exactly. And so even when you think about debates, right? And I was chatting with a friend about us hosting this concept for certain current affair topics. And we're like, is a debate the best way to approach it? Because that also then just is binary again. It's I'm for this because I'm against this because and so I don't know if that is helping the situation. So you're like, maybe we just need one of these big round discussion tables when everyone's and the goal is how do we find common ground and come together, and that being a better way of addressing topics where I actually want to build bridges, to use that word. I want to bring commonalities. I want to get people to be like, oh, actually we agree on 3 out of 5 things. So we're not so opposed after all.
There's a quote I'm going to steal from Simon Sinek. And when I heard him say this the other day, I haven't connected it to what we were talking about until I thought of it there. But he said that he and his wife were having a really bad argument and both of them were getting more and more irate with the other one and they weren't getting anywhere. And he realized that both of them were arguing why they were right and why the other person was wrong. And he said, well, stop.
Yeah.
And he said, I'll continue this conversation with you. He said, but now I'm only allowed to say what you've done right and I've done wrong.
Yeah.
And you're only allowed to say what I've done right and you've done wrong. And he said within 3 minutes, the pair of them were laughing.
Because then you're like, oh, wait, actually?
Exactly. And it gets virality because it's dramatic and it's confrontational. But I can't even remember his name. There's this right-wing young speaker with stupid hair in the States. And he is an incredible debate artist. And he gets put in a room with 20 left-wing young students that are all very, caught up in their beliefs. They think they're the most righteous things on earth and they will fight them to the death. And they get put in a circle and they debate. And I can't remember how many millions of views it had when I saw it, but just this argument of I'm right, you're stupid, I'm right, you're stupid. But imagine if you put it the other way, as Simon Sinek put it, where you put a debate artist from the left and a debate artist from the right and put them in. They're only allowed to bring up points that the other person is right on without any satire, without any sarcasm.
Where would you end up, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe we just solve all these again.
So politicians and everybody.
See ya. Deborah, you lived exactly up to my expectations.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
If people want to keep up with the many things that you do, where can they go?
So they can go to fugee.org, Fugee, and for that would be if you want to support the work that we're doing with refugee education in Malaysia, and changing lives. And I think it's work that matters. And I think for me, coming out of even COVID and just for a lot of the stuff people are going through today, it's a lesson that I've learned is that serving, however you want to use that word, serving really helps the soul. And so giving back, finding different ways of how you can give of yourself to another person in whatever way. It's really so soul satisfying, if that makes sense.
Amazing.
Try it if you haven't.
And you also have a podcast as well?
I do. It's called Debonair, and we wrapped up season 1 last year, so we're working on season 2. And very excited about speaking to incredible people and really getting into. Well, we kind of anchor on people's relationship with money in the podcast, so we're always exploring how people related to money growing up, the role of money in their lives, and how it influenced them then, their past, but also their present and their future. So,
I will put the links below in the description and everyone go check that out.
Thank you.